this lesson is a very important lesson. It has to do with the cash book. The cash book is a part of the books of original entry, also known as journals, also known as day books. It is an extremely important part because not only is it a journal or acts as a journal or book of original entry, but it also acts as a ledger account, which means that it looks like a T and it deals with cash account and bank account. So in other words, all cash and bank transactions. So since it looks like a T, that means that it follows the double entry rules. Cash and bank are assets, which means that we use the rules for assets where you debit any increases in the cash and bank and you credit any decreases in the cash or bank. So basically, whenever it is that you receive money, whether it be in the form of cash in hand or cash in bank, you're going to write on the debit side. And whenever you spend money, decrease money, reduce the amount of money in terms of cash in hand and in terms of cash at bank, that means you're going to credit it. Credit the cash book, write it on the credit side. So we first start with the simplest of the cash books. The simplest of the cash books would be what we call a two-column. It is a two-column cash book because it represents the cash and bank accounts on both the debit side, which would be all the receipts of cash in hand and cash at bank, and on the credit side, which would be examples. As you can see there, any payments, any money spent in terms of cash or check, money from the bank account, that will be recorded on the credit side. So you're seeing some examples there in terms of what you debit and what you credit. And it's really, 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 really simple going forward. Once you receive money, you're going to put it on the debit side. Once you spend money, you're going to put it on the credit side. As simple as that. So this is an example in terms of actual figures. We have the folio column in our example, but it is usually ignored in an exam question, especially they have come very, very, very simple, but this is the actual format. So if you do see the formats like this, unless they ask you for the folio is basically where you're going to find the accounts. So you find the capital account in the general ledger, you find the receivable accounts in the sales ledger, you find payables in the purchases ledger. That is basically what it is. But unless they ask you for it specifically, you're not going to have to do it. Especially, they tend to give you the templates for your cash book and they usually don't have that column, the folio column. Okay, so don't worry too much. So we go very simply, and once again, the very, very simple statement is that you debit whenever money is received. You have your columns on the debit side to represent cash received and money in the bank. So every time you receive, you would either debit the cash column or your bank column. And then for your credit side, you have the same columns, cash account, bank account, and you will credit or put it on this side whenever you spend money. So once again, extremely, extremely simple in terms of that. Just remember, you have your debit side, you have your credit side. On both sides, you have the cash account, which is cash in hand, and you have the bank account, which is cash in the bank. And it's usually also identified whenever you see the word check. Whenever you see check, that is your bank account. And you just have to identify which side you have to put it on because both sides have a cash account and a bank account to represent your receipts and your payments or your spending. Okay, so going forward, there is one other item that goes into the cash book. So we talked about receipts going on the debit side and payments going on the credit side. You have what is called a contra entry. And a contra entry would be transactions where both the cash account and the bank account are affected, but not on the same side. Meaning that it would not just be on the debit side for both of them, or it would not just be on the credit side for both of them. If they are both affected for a contra entry, one is debited and one is credited. So the best way to understand that would be, of course, through examples. And what you would see is that we have two examples of the contra entry. So the first one has to do with if you deposit cash in the bank account. So our example, we have $2,000 cash was deposited into the bank account. That means that two things were affected there, the cash and the bank, and the opposite happened to them. Usually when you identify it as a contra entry, the question that you would ask would be, of course, to know which one is account is debited and which account is credited, which one increased. Because once you identify which one, whether it was cash or bank that increased, that would be the one that is debited, and then the other one automatically would be the one that is credited because you lost money from that one, okay? So in terms of the cash was deposited into the bank account, if it was deposited into the bank account, that means the bank account was the one that got more money in it, more cash in the bank account. So the bank would therefore end up being the one that is debited, and then the cash would be the one that is credited. And how do we know? It's based on the double entry rules. Once again, they are both assets. And as assets, if it increases, it will be debit, and the bank increase, so we debit that. And the opposite happens when it decreases. So the cash, we have less cash in hand because we put it in the bank, and that means that that would be credited. So then we have another example, withdrawal. So that's the opposite. Cash is withdrawn. So what in effect happens is that you now have more cash in hand. So this is a contra entry because both are affected, opposites. One goes up and one goes down. So once again, to know which one is debited and which one is credited, you ask the question, which one increased? And as we said, since you withdrew cash, your cash in hand is the one that increases. So based on the double entry rule, you're going to debit your cash with the amount, which is $2,000. And then in terms of the other one, that went down because you took the money out of the bank account. So you have less money in your bank account, which means that it will be credit bank account. And those are your two examples in terms of your contra entry. It is only these two. You could either withdraw cash from the bank or deposit cash into the bank. There's another way of phrasing it, which would be to cash a check. Cashing a check means that you increasing your cash in hand because you're taking cash out of the bank account. So it's the same as withdrawing cash from your bank account, okay? So the steps, basic steps, we're going through really quickly. For a complicated question that gives you a lot of information, some of that information may be non-cash transactions. They may be credit transactions. So the first thing you will have to look at is this a cash transaction or not? If it is not a cash transaction, it does not belong in the cash book because the cash book is for all cash and bank or check transactions, not for credit transactions, because no money is received, no money is spent. So once the answer is no, it is not a cash transaction, you're ignoring it when you are doing your cash book. But if the answer is yes, that means it does have to go into the cash book. So your next question would be, is it on the debit side or is it on the credit side? And how would you know that? By asking whether the money was received, whether it was paid or spent, or whether it is a contra entry. So if the answer is you received money, whether it be cash in hand or cash in the bank, that means you will go on the debit side because it is based once again on the double entry rules. Once the answer is you spent money or you paid out money, you lost money, reduced money, it will be entered on the credit side of your 2-column cash book, your cash book. If the answer is you have identified it as one of the contra entries, then that means you're going to have to put it on both sides. And as we said, this is how you would determine which side it is. And your contra entry, of course, you will have to just identify which one increased in the bank and the cash, and then just do the opposite. So like, for example, remember our examples, when you deposited, that meant that the bank increased, so you debited the bank and you credited the cash in hand. The other example that we had, it was a withdrawal of cash from the bank. So in that case, it meant that your cash in hand increased. So you debited that and then you credited your bank account. Okay, so we are just going to go through this very long example, but we are going to do it very, 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 very quickly, remembering that we are going to ask these questions for each one. All of these transactions are cash transactions, okay? So we're going to do that now. I would suggest very, very, very strongly that you just write these two things on top there, because in an exam you want to save your brain cells, right? You don't want you kind of have to manage your time, and you also have to manage your stress levels. And you know, some of you or some of us might get a little worked up because we're doing things within a time. Putting these little notes helps you in that you don't have to think about everything, you can just glance. So in pencil, you can erase it afterwards. Over the debit side, received money. So you know that when Totally Cool, that is the business, this business, so we focus Totally Cool's perspective. Whenever Totally Cool receives money, it is going to go on this side. And you will identify, all you have to identify, of course, would be whether they received cash or whether they received cash in the bank. Okay, and the same thing over the credit side, you can just jot the note, spent money. So once you identify that money has been spent, you look and you say, okay, it goes on that side. All right, so it's this side. Very, 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 very easy. Once you just jot down this, it saves on your brain cells. So with that, we're going to start just a little activity. Can you look through? So pause this video, look through the video, see, can you identify contra entries? Let me give you a hint. There are examples of the 2 contra entries. So assuming you have paused, see if you identified. And now I give you the answer. So you have unpaused, and June 20th is a contra entry, and June 26th is a contra entry, meaning that both the cash and the bank has been affected. Okay, so we will keep that in mind. Now we are going to go into the actual cash book. This is a 2-column. We have not added the 3rd column as yet. We will do that soon. So what we have is 2015, 2015, 2015, you have our date. And we always start with a balance unless the business is a very new business. If it has been operating for more than one period, that means you would have a balance. And there is your balance, June the 1st. Your balance is always at the beginning of the period. So whatever is the first date, in this case, it is the month of June. Cash asset always debit side. So you're going to go on the debit side and you're going to have June 1st, balance brought down under the cash column, $3,000. This is where I emphasize something. Bank is an asset if it has cash in the bank account. But we have learned when we did the balance sheet, for example, that there is a current liability called bank overdraft. This is when your bank account does not have money because you have overdrawn your account, because you have an agreement with the bank that you can overdraw a certain amount, and now you have what is called a bank overdraft. So because of that, with the bank account, it can go either way. If there's money in the bank, you will put it on the debit side. If, however, there is a bank overdraft, which is a liability, so they would either have the words bank overdraft or they will tell you there's a credit balance. Once they tell you there's a credit balance, they have just given you the answer. The balance goes on the credit side. Good. So what we're going to do is we're looking at our example down below, and what we are seeing there is that both of them would be debit because there is money in the bank account. Cash at bank, 8,500. So that means that it will go on the debit side. So for bank, 8,500. You use the same line. You don't have to go and put June 1st balance brought down and bank separately. Use the same line. Once both of them are assets and the balance is therefore on the debit side, you use the same line just like you're seeing there. Okay? This is your balance. Now we're going to get into your transactions. Remember, always asking, did you receive money? In which case, as you have it noted up there, you put it on this side. Did you spend money? Which means that in this case, you put it on the credit side. Very good. Ready, set, go. So we go on to the next transaction, which is June the 5th. Received a check from El Kai. So if we received money, we are on the debit side. Simply put the date, June 5th. Who did you receive it from? El Kai is the account. So El Kai account, all you have to put is the name of the account. You don't have to put any sentences. We don't do that in accounts. You have noticed we don't use paragraphs at all. We deal with ledger accounts. So El Kai, and what did we receive? A check. Once you see check, it is bank account. Okay, just note to self. So bank account, you go in the bank column. How much did you receive? 1,500. Nice, simple, easy. You go on to the next transaction. So June 7th, purchase inventory, meaning purchase means that you spent money. So that means you're on this side, the credit side. So you just put the date, June 7th. Purchase inventory. The account for purchase inventory is always purchases. And then you purchased it with cash. So you go under the cash column and you put how much you purchased it for, 500. Too easy. Next transaction. So we have June the 10th, sold inventory. Sold inventory, the account would be sales. Whenever we sell something, we receive money, received money. So therefore we are on the debit side. So you just put the date, sales is the account, and we received cash for the sale. So you go under the cash column and you put the amount you received, 1,950. Next transaction. Remember, we are just asking the same question over and over. Did you receive? Did you spend? Is it a contra? We already saw there are only 2 contras, so which means all the others is either received or spent. Okay, so what happened on June the 11th? Paid J. Joseph. So that means payment, spent money, we're on the credit side. Simply put the date. Who did we pay? J. Joseph, that's the account. Since it's check, we go under the bank column, $2,000. Move on, next transaction, June the 15th. June the 15th, we purchased office equipment by check. When you purchase a non-current asset, that is the account. So purchase means we spent money. Since we spent money, that would mean that we are on the credit side. Date, 15th of June. Office equipment, as I said, is the account. And since we purchased by check, go under the bank column, 2,400. Excellent. And then we move on to June 18th. Cash sales always means we received money. So we on the debit side, June 18th. The account is not cash sales. We do not have an account called cash sales. It is just sales. All right, so detail would be sales just like June 10th. So you're only going to be seeing the word sales as the account. And since it was paid directly into the bank, we are going to go to our bank column that represents our bank account, and we are going to put in the $1,050. Sales of $150 put into the bank account, increasing it. That's why it's on the debit side. So we go on to June 20th. June 20th was our contra. The steps. So you will go to the debit side because you have to put it on both sides. So these are my steps, sharing it with you, the process in terms of saving brain cells, okay? You go on the debit side and June the 20th. So you see that both were affected, which is why it's a contra entry. Which one increased? If you deposited cash into the bank account, so you put cash into the bank account, that means your bank account increased. How do you increase your bank account? By going to your bank column and putting the amount there. Note, it is not to put the word bank. If we can increase our bank account by writing the word or saying the word bank, then all of us would be screaming bank a lot and seeing our account just going up. That does not happen in real life. So to increase your bank account, you go to the bank column and you put in the amount that was deposited, which is $900. Your detail will therefore be cash, meaning where did you get the money from? From your cash in hand. So your detail will be cash, and the CE represents contra entry. Contra entry, so that the users, which in this case will be the examiners or the teachers when we are correcting, we will know that we have to look out for the other part of the transaction, which is on the credit side. So after you have done this, note something up. If you have information under the bank column, the word cannot be, or the details cannot be bank as well. Okay, it has to be the other one. So bank column, the detail will be cash, and cash column, the detail would be bank. So this is where you do your thinking, your brain cells. My suggestion in the exam where you are saving your brain cells, when you go to the credit side, you just simply do the opposite. Okay, and no, you don't have to put it on the same line. You put it on whatever the next line is, and it will be June 20th. The opposite cash, that means your detail on this side will be bank with the CE, contra entry, and then your cash column will have the 900 to show that your cash in hand is what decreased. And where did it go? It went into your bank account. which can be seen on the debit side, where you saw your bank account got the increase of 900. Where did it come from? Your cash account. And this is how you do the contra entry, right? Just do the steps. You will see it in the next contra entry. So you have a chance, or you can just, rewind and go through that again, right? Right, good. So we're just going to move on since we're trying to make this as quick as possible. So June 21st, paid rent by check, paid, so spent money, credit side. June 21st, what did you pay? Rent expense by check, so bank column 1,800. Nice. And then we have June 23rd, paid again, so we go on the credit side. Wages is what we paid this time. We paid by cash, so we go under the cash column, 1,300. Speeding up a bit more, June 24th, bought stationery, which means you spent money, so you're back on the credit side again. So you just put the date. What did you spend it on? Stationery, that is what you purchased. You bought for office use. You used cash, so you go under the cash column, $350. Next transaction, June 26th, and here we have our second contra entry because both cash and bank were affected in opposite ways. One increased and one decreased. So your question to know which side would be which one increased. So we go to our debit side. I do the debit side first. You put the date, June 26th. You ask yourself which one increased. If you withdrew cash from the bank, that means we now have more cash in hand. Having more cash in hand means that our cash increased. So we go to the cash column and we're going to put how much it increased by 200. Once again, it is not the words, because if we could scream cash and get cash, we will all be doing it. Okay, so you go into the column and you increase there like you would do in an accounts book where you see it written down. And then your detail would be the other one, which would in this case be bank. And you put the CE to represent that it is a contra entry. Then that means that we have to go to the credit side, and saving your brain cells, you just do the opposite. So what you will have is June 26th, opposite, cash, CE, and then you're going to your bank column, 200, to show that you took that money out of your bank account. And that is the end of the contra entry recording. Okay, so now we're going back to the other transactions and you're asking again. So June 27th, received payment, received money. So you're on the debit side, simply put the date. Who did you receive it from? Motley, that's the account. 3,000 check. Once you see check, it is bank account. So you go to your bank account column and you put in the $3,000. Move on to June 28th. Borrowed from the bank and received a check. Bank loan, in other words, received a check. So we're staying on the debit side. You put the date. It is a bank loan, so that is the account. And you received a check. So check, bank column, $9,000. Then you have June 29th, withdrew cash for personal use. Once you see personal use, that is drawings. And drawings is a decrease in the business money. The business no longer, remember the owner, when he takes money for his private business, the cash book is not dealing with his private business. The cash book is dealing with the business. Okay, so once it is personal or private, that is drawings, and that is always on the credit side because the business is losing that money. So you will go on the credit side, you have 29th of June, drawings is the account. And what did he withdraw? He withdrew cash. So you go in your cash column and is $300 is how much he withdrew. Last transaction, June 30th, paid Merger Limited by check. That means that we're on the credit side because we spent money, paid money, payment. So the date is June 30th. Who did we pay? Merger Limited. So that's the account. And it was checked. So we go to the bank column, $1,900. And that finishes the very, very simple 2-column cash book. 2-column cash book because it is just the cash account and the bank account that is being represented here. But what we are going to do is we're going to go on to the actual cash book that CSEC requires you to know. And all businesses, they do not tend to just deal with the 2-column cash book unless they only deal with cash. But if they deal with credit transactions, which means that you have receivables and payables, then you will most likely need the 3rd column, which would be cash discounts, which we are going to go into in the next part of our lesson.